I went through something recently, brother. I thought I'd go gray, I swear. After working in the police for so long, mate, you know it yourself, I've never encountered anything like this. My friend, who recently resigned from the force, spoke quietly after tossing back a shot of vodka. We were sitting in my kitchen. We hadn't seen each other in a long time. He was always at work. The man saw his own family only while they were sleeping, let alone me. But finally we met. And not because we missed each other, but because he was in a state of shock. Something happened at his work. And as I understood, he wanted to talk to me about it. A huge man who gave most of his life to police work, who survived things not everyone is lucky to survive, sat in my kitchen pouring vodka into the glasses with a trembling hand. We drank again, and wiping his mouth with his sleeve, he began his story. So, about a week ago, a call came into our department. A woman is calling, and I happen to be standing near the duty room, grabbing some papers. Out of the corner of my ear, I hear the woman is in a real hysteria on the phone, crying, stuttering. In a word, she says her son is missing. He was playing in her yard. It was already evening. She calls him from the porch. No answer. Then she went out to look. Nothing. Like he vanished through the ground. She called all his friends, their parents, that no one saw or heard anything. She's crying to the duty officer, explaining the situation. Anyway, we drove there. Even though our town isn't particularly large, in all the time I've lived here, I've never been to that area. Where is it? I asked. It's by the railroad tracks near the bio factory. By the way, I still don't know the address. It's the very edge. There are apartment buildings, and further on are rails, ties, and a forest behind them. A gloomy place. Well, what happened next? So we arrived there, and the whole yard has gathered by the house. Men are standing with flashlights. There were maybe 30 people, if not more. We went through the entrances, questioned people, but as expected, no one saw or heard anything. Well, what can you do? A person is missing. We had to call the searchers. Those same men joined them, and we started combing the area. We looked everywhere. In trash bins and manholes and basements. But it was all unsuccessful. Maybe after an hour of useless searching, the dogs finally picked up a scent and led everyone across the tracks into the forest. I didn't go there, of course. I stayed in the yard, dealing with protocols and sitting in the car. The woman was losing her mind, and I don't know how much she cried then. No matter how I tried to calm her down, it was all in vain. I ran to the pharmacy, bought her some sedatives. You could understand her, of course, but the constant stupid questions, the crying and the hysterics were already very much in the way of focusing. I had to rewrite everything several times. And in the forest, did they find him or not? Listen, I'm telling you. Elias grunted dissatisfiedly, pouring himself another shot. They were looking for the boy all night. The dogs lost the trail several times, and eventually, towards morning, they came out to a small swamp in the middle of that forest, stinking just a nightmare. And they found him. Dead. Jesus, I whispered. That's not the worst of it, believe me. He downed the shot and continued. They pulled the body out, and the poor guy was like he'd been cut in half. You know, I've seen a lot at work, but this was the first time. His legs were literally hanging on by a thread. His insides were on the outside, floating there in the water. Instead of them, under the ribs was straw. His arms and legs were twisted in some wrong position and carelessly fastened with wire. A few of the men who were helping search even threw up or fainted. We had to bring them back to their senses. They called me and reported everything. With a heavy heart, I went to the mother of the deceased. In short, I told her everything as it was. It was insanely hard. I can't even tell you. But I had a feeling then that she was ready for this result of the search. There were no hysterics, no tearing of hair. She just gripped my jacket tightly and cried quietly. Further, everything was as usual. We opened a case and started searching for whoever did this horror. The next day, when I came to her house to clarify a few details on the case, I found her lying in the bathroom with her wrists slit. Interestingly, the front door was not locked. That's how I got into her apartment. Judging by the interior, she wasn't wealthy at all, and with the loss of her son, the woman had lost the meaning of her life. The case was opened, the criminal was sought, but there wasn't a single lead, so it lay on the shelf until better times. But we remembered it when the story repeated itself. In the middle of the night, they called the department. A child was missing. He was playing on the street and vanished as if through the ground. And again, in roughly the same area as the last one. I'm going there again, seeing the same parents and the same men who searched before. Everyone went to the same swamp, but this time no one was found. Not at night, not the next day, not a week later, during which, by the way, another child disappeared. A girl, 12 years old. She went to the store and didn't come home. And if the previous cases were in the evening or night, this time the girl disappeared in broad daylight. Although, it's the kind of area where, whether it's day or night, you won't see a single living soul on the street anyway. So I wasn't particularly surprised by the fact of a person missing in broad daylight. They searched for them everywhere, of course. They combed that forest up and down. Nothing was found. Not a single damn lead, you understand? And the dogs? If they worked somehow the first time, in the following ones, they acted like they were brain dead. You shove a thing under their nose and they whine and rub against your legs. Good thing there were no problems with the parents like the first time. On the other hand, they didn't know about the death of their children. They waited and hoped. Rumors spread through the town instantly. People were naturally afraid to go outside after sunset. Adults were afraid. What can you say about children? And not only after sunset. During the day, if they went to school or on other business, it was only accompanied by adults. Something had to be done about this, and the bosses were pressing. After all, 3 people were gone, 1 already on the other side. Honestly, at that moment, I thought all 3 were already there. But as they say, hope dies last. Elias lit a cigarette and continued. The case stalled. What didn't we do? Where didn't we look? Who didn't we question? And time after time, we hit a dead end. Until one moment. Another disappearance of a girl, a bit further from that ill-fated street. That's where the first lead appeared. 2 weeks later, when the guys and I arrived at the scene, we learned one interesting thing that confirmed my guesses about a maniac operating in these parts. Did you lose consciousness? I asked. We questioned everyone who was at least somewhat familiar with the last victim. Among those questioned was that girl's friend. As it turned out, she was the last one to see her before the disappearance. and she tells us that her friend had been messaging some friend for a few days who promised her a new phone. The girls were about 10 years old, maybe a bit older. Well, they understood what messaging, social networks, phones, and such were. But there isn't much common sense at that age. You understand it yourself. So she went to meet the friend from the messages to get a new phone. The friend didn't know where the meeting was supposed to take place, but it was at least something. The next day, we registered about 10 accounts on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, everywhere, and we tried to lure the friends who give away new phones. 2 days later, a suspicious type messaged one of the ops. He writes on, "Hi, let's get to know each other." The op says, "Hi, let's." He intentionally wrote with mistakes so as not to cause suspicion. The contact didn't give his name, but only talked about how much he loves computer games and how he had an extra gaming console lying around that he didn't need at all. And being so kind, he was thinking about who he could give it to. Brooks, my partner, got into the role. After half an hour of messaging, a meeting was set near the railroad crossing by the biofactory, in the same area, just a bit closer to the forest. Brooks didn't ask awkward questions and agreed to everything like a truly naive child. It was getting towards evening, and Brooks and 2 other ops stayed at the station to finish the messaging. We're sitting there, drinking coffee, when suddenly a message comes. I'm taking the console and heading to the spot, and a happy emoji after it. Right after that, a photo of a beautiful box. I don't know what model it was. I don't understand that stuff. Brooks replied that he was asking Mom since the time was late. While he was asking Mom, we packed up, got in the car, and drove. At that time, it seemed like everything would be easy. We'd arrive, quickly tackle the scum, and take him to the station, and there we deal with who he is and what kind of console he has. Yeah, naive. My companion grunted and lit another cigarette. Suddenly he went silent. At that moment, I noticed how goosebumps ran across his trembling hands. We drove there. We took pistols and even put on body armor just in case. We parked the car a distance away and went on foot. There are rails there, and next to them, some railroad building. I looked, there the bastard stands, holding a box and looking around. We got as close as possible. I jump out and shout, "Police! Hands behind your head, on the ground." And he bolted into the forest. So fast he was gone instantly, but the white box gave him away in the dark. Why he didn't throw it away, I still don't understand. We went after him, of course. Through the thicket and bushes, I realized he was already pulling away, and judging by his movements, he knew the area well. I pulled my service weapon and opened fire. My partners did the same. I don't know if he was cursed or if we were just lousy shots, but the bullets flew past him. 4 people shooting at once, and that scum just keeps running. We're running, and then I hear a splash of water and a cry. I look back. Brooks fell into the swamp. The same one where we fished out the first body. I shouted for one man to stay and help him get out. The other one ran with me. We couldn't let this bastard get away. The 2 of us are running, shining flashlights, trying not to lose sight of him. Suddenly the runner stops. In the light of my flashlight, I see 3 men coming out toward us. One was big as an ox, and 2 were scrawny, overgrown, and dirty, like they just crawled out of a coal mine. And the one who was running from us joined them. They're standing there. One has a torch, another a kerosene lamp, and every single one is armed. One with a sickle, one with an axe, one with a knife. They stood about 10 meters from us, and then, you understand, I got terrified, like a little girl. I don't know what happened to me. I didn't have time to react and aim the pistol before I heard my partner shot, and then the howl of one of the locals. After the shot, they attacked the poor guy like animals and knocked the pistol out of his hands. I immediately went to help, just aimed, when suddenly there was a terrible pain in the back of my head. A broken branch flies in front of me, and I fall to the ground. No, I didn't black out. The pain was just such that I couldn't do anything. I just lay there twitching and watched them run to me and start tying my hands and feet. I couldn't make out their words. I tried to kick and resist, but a second blow to the head calmed me down. After the second one, I lost consciousness. "What a nightmare," I muttered. "Look." Elias turned and showed me the stitches on his head. Besides that, I saw many strange wounds on his nape, near his ears and on his neck. That was also them. Elias nodded silently and continued. I wake up from them pouring cold water on me, a thin stream as if mocking. I open my eyes. Everything is double. My head is splitting in half. I try to move my hands and feet. Nothing. They tied me so tight, they were completely numb. Slowly, the focus returns. The first thing I saw were those two scrawny freaks. They're sitting at a table playing cards. Judging by the smell, I was in some abandoned place or catacombs. It smelled of dampness, mold, and unwashed human bodies. My partner was lying tied next to me, also coming to his senses. Seeing we woke up, one of them stood up and came over. "They're awake?" He grinned with rotten teeth. I started talking the nonsense that we were from the police, and they should free us immediately. In response, the freaks just laughed and kicked me in the stomach. I still have the bruise. I don't know who they were. Some insane people? Some cult? But one thing was worse. What I saw next put me in shock. Lying on the damp ground, I understood what awaited us. They took my partner first. They were angry at him for wounding their friend back in the forest. They took me after him, apparently so I could watch. They sat him on a chair, and one of the scrawny ones came close to my ear and said, "Now you will die many, many times." And another freak took a gas torch and, turning it on full power, points the flame at my partner's head. The hair caught fire instantly. The room filled with smoke and stench. He screamed at the top of his voice. One of the freaks held my eyes, so I couldn't close them, and watched all this. My colleague was screaming, and his cry echoed off the concrete walls. Then, when the smoke cleared and he lost consciousness, I saw what still stands before my eyes. Charred, melted skin together with hair hanging from his head, exposing the skull. He was still alive. I saw him breathing. Then one of them took a knife and simply slit his throat. Blood sprayed on the floor. His suffering didn't last long, and I understood it would be my turn. I decided to buy time and try to talk to them. They sat me on the same chair, throwing my colleague into a corner. When the kerosene lamp lit that place, I saw what was happening there. There were children, those same children whose photos were shown to me by crying parents. God, what they did to them. They were really sick creatures who made some kind of effigies out of living people. I saw the girl who went for the phone. She stood motionless in a position like a bridge. It was clear they intentionally broke her and fastened her with wire so the body wouldn't change shape. The boy also stood with his arms and legs turned the other way. Their insides were removed, and the bodies were stuffed with straw. But apparently not all were removed, as the corpses were starting to rot, and I saw their eyes covered with fly larvae. "Why are you doing this?" I couldn't stand it. "Why children?" "Because he likes it," he muttered, pointing his head toward the ceiling. "For my lord." And then I understood they were some fanatics. "Why do you stuff the bodies with straw?" I asked again. "It's a scarecrow, so we have a good harvest, so the weather doesn't spoil." The freak grinned, running a knife over my ear. "But why children?" I yelled. "Because they're weak and stupid," the second one said, and stuffed a smelly rag into my mouth. Elias paused. "I need to speak out, brother. My mind is going after all this." He continued through tears. "Then they slit the stomach of the guy who was with me and pulled out everything that was inside with their bare hands. They pulled it out and threw it at me. His intestines were hanging on my neck." "Listen," I interrupted, "you said there were 4 of them. Where were the other 2? "I don't know, but that's when my guys found me. They were looking for us and went to the scream. I heard a door slam and steps. My guys, covered in mud, broke in. One freak just opened the door and was gunned down instantly. Then a second shot at the other freak. The guys, seeing the picture around, just emptied their magazines into them. I was sitting on the chair with my pants down, crying, holding my friend's intestines. I had a nervous breakdown. Later, SWAT and the ambulance arrived. I quit the force. Those other 2 were never caught. No one knows where they went. Maybe they ran to another city to snatch children and turn them into scarecrows. I often think, what would have happened if the guys didn't find that place? If they didn't make it? We wouldn't be talking now. It's very scary, brother, and I'm indebted to those guys until I die. They told me later they went to the scream. It was heard well in the forest, to the scream of the poor guy whose head was being melted with a gas torch. What to do with those 2? I asked. Not my concern anymore. Let someone else deal with them, he said, poured another shot, and quietly cried. Opening the front door to my apartment, I was hit by a sickeningly sweet scent. Right at that moment, a loud, shrill laugh echoed from the kitchen. I winced in frustration. My wife's friend had shown up after all, just like she said she would. She had been traveling across Japan for an entire month, returned literally this morning, and rushed straight to her best friend to spill the stories, as if it couldn't have been done over the phone.
Hey, how was work?
My wife, Sarah, said as she waddled into the hallway with that distinct pregnancy gait. She was supporting her heavy belly with her right hand. Only 2 months left until our son was due. We'd already picked a name, James, after my grandfather. Hey, I said, leaning down to plant a kiss on her plump, rosy cheek. Everything's great on my end. How about you? I looked pointedly toward the kitchen and wrinkled my nose. That was the source of the nauseating perfume. Sarah's friend, Chloe, seemed to pour it on herself by the gallon. I couldn't stand her. She'd been terrorizing me since high school, and it had dragged on all the way through graduation.
I warned you Chloe was coming over,
Sarah said reproachfully.
We haven't spoken for 6 weeks. We missed each other.
I had hoped she'd be gone by the time I got back. Damn it, I should have stayed late at work, I grumbled to myself, placing my shoes across from a pair of massive platform heels. Left her damn hooves right here, the big heifer. Straightening up, I forced a sugary sweet smile onto my face because that snake Chloe was crawling out into the hallway, wearing a dress that was far too short.
Hello, Alexi Poo.
She purred, giving me a playful little wave.
How are things?
For some reason, Chloe was the only one who called me by that nickname, one she'd given me years ago. Yeah, hi, I replied distractedly, edging my way toward the bathroom. I had to hold my breath just to avoid inhaling the toxic fumes coming off my wife's friend.
Where are you running off to?
Chloe asked snidely.
Don't you want to hear about Japan? It's an incredible country. I went to Tokyo Disneyland, the Imperial Palace Gardens, the Aokigahara Forest. It was so interesting.
I'll hear it some other time, I muttered quickly, grabbing the handle of the bathroom door. I wanted to lock myself in for a long time, but a hand suddenly clamped firmly onto my wrist. Chloe was far too close, hitting me with a blast of that wild fruit scent. I nearly choked on the air.
Oh, don't be such a bore.
Chloe pulled me insistently toward the kitchen.
We haven't seen each other in so long. I want to chat. Come on, come on.
Okay, just let me wash my hands. I gave in quickly because arguing with that stubborn woman was a losing battle. She'd throw a fit and Sarah would get stressed. It was better to just tolerate her for a bit, gritting my teeth. Where's Ben? I asked, referring to my younger brother, as I reluctantly followed the women into the kitchen.
Oh, he's glued to the computer again.
Sarah sighed, waving her hand dismissively.
You should see what Chloe gave me.
She pointed to the kitchen counter. There stood a large, square, black wooden box with an intricate carved design on the sides. Clouds were painted in gold filigree, and on the top was a red sun with 2 cranes flying toward it. And what is it? I asked tentatively, looking from the box to my wife.
It's a Japanese happiness box.
Chloe answered instead, smiling proudly.
It brings wealth, health, and beautiful children into the home.
Oh, I see. Thanks. I managed to endure half an hour in Chloe's company, listening to her nonstop chatter and shrill laughter. Eventually, I made an excuse about being exhausted from work and wanting to lie down. She didn't want to let me go, asking me to stay just a little longer. Finally, I managed to escape, practically kicking my way into the bedroom I shared with Sarah. Unfortunately, there was no peace here either. My computer was still occupied by Ben, who was playing some shooter, wearing my own noise-canceling headphones. Ben was 7 years younger than me. He'd graduated high school 4 years ago, but he refused to go to college or get a job. One day, our parents lost their patience. They had a massive blowout, and Ben stormed out of the house. He asked Sarah and me if he could stay for a little while until he found a job and a place of his own. Of course, I agreed. I couldn't just throw my brother out on the street. Our apartment was big enough for everyone. But Ben's little while had stretched into a full year, a very difficult year. Sarah loved my brother about as much as I loved her friend. They fought almost every day because wherever Ben went, he left a trail of trash behind him. And that infuriated my clean freak wife. With Sarah's long-awaited pregnancy, the arguments had only gotten worse. I tried to stay neutral because I didn't want to fight with my wife, but I didn't want to lose the bond with my brother either. But with the baby on the way, I had to drop hints to Ben more and more often that it was time for him to move out. "You're still wasting your life?" I said, pulling the headphones off my brother's head. He jumped in his chair, startled, and stared at me with wide eyes like a frightened lemur. What's wrong with you? Why'd you scare me like that?" he shouted, pausing the game. "Are you serious? Did you look for a job today?" I asked, crouching down in front of the large rabbit hutch. Sarah's favorite white rabbit, Snowy, was peacefully chewing on a cabbage leaf, her back legs stretched out. Ben, for some reason, hated that rabbit and kept threatening to turn her into a stew when no one was home. "I'll find a job. Why are you starting this again?" my brother snapped, pulling the headphones back onto his head and grumbling under his breath. "Everyone just leave me alone. I'm sick of it. Can't get any peace around here." I sighed heavily. I gave up on him in my head. I didn't want to fight right now, though my hand was itching to give him a good smack on the back of the head. Sometimes it felt like Ben never grew out of his teenage years. Soon, to my relief, Chloe went home, and Ben and I went back to the kitchen to eat the leftovers from dinner. At the table, Sarah and my brother managed to bicker again. Ben just wanted a closer look at the box, and Sarah snatched it out of his hands. Before bed, she placed the box on the dresser and carefully put all her rings, necklaces, earrings, and other trinkets inside. When the box opened, I felt that unpleasant, sickly sweet scent of Chloe's perfume for a second. It felt like she'd sprayed it inside the box too. The next day I got home 2 hours early. On Fridays, our work days were shortened. No one met me at the door, but the TV was blaring in the living room. Sarah and Ben were still brooding, judging by their sour faces and how far apart they were sitting on the couch. Sarah was sitting with the sleeping Snowy in her lap, and Ben was hugging a massive, greasy bucket of popcorn. Instead of watching something good, they had some horror movie on with a terrifying nun. Arguing with Sarah that she shouldn't watch horror movies in her condition was pointless. It was her favorite genre, and it was the one thing she and Ben actually agreed on. Right after the movie ended, Sarah went to sleep and I sat down at the computer before my brother could grab it. How long could he hog my PC? I wanted to play in peace. On my own weekend, I sat there until late into the night, shooting at mutants in some wasteland. I noticed the time had passed 1 a.m. Telling myself, that's enough, I took off my headphones and exited the game. I stretched with a wide yawn, rolling my desk chair back a bit. The wheels moved across the rug with a quiet creak, and over that sound I heard something else. A faint, repetitive clicking. I dropped my arms and strained my ears, trying to locate the source. I leaned to the side and looked into the hutch. Snowy was fast asleep. After a second's pause, the sound repeated, louder this time, followed by a barely audible long moan. "Sarah?" I turned quickly toward our bed, my heart thumping with anxiety. My wife was sleeping peacefully on her back. I could see the duvet rising and falling with her deep breaths. I exhaled in relief. I'd been terrified that something had happened to her. And then, another click. It came from the dresser. I snapped my head toward the sound. The Japanese box, clearly visible in the glow of the monitor, was open. A face, white as pure snow, was peeking out of it. Long, dark hair was scattered messily around the box. Wide-open eyes were staring directly at me. The pupils were an abyssal, bottomless black. The head was sticking halfway out, like a neighborhood kid peeking over a fence. I don't know how long I sat there frozen before I bolted from the chair. It felt like a bucket of boiling water had been poured over me from head to toe. I blinked, and the head was gone. The box was closed, as if nothing had happened. I stood there for a while, indecisive. I was terrified to go near the box, but I wanted to convince myself that I'd just imagined it. Sleep deprivation can cause visual hallucinations after all, because in reality, no one could have fit inside that box. It was only 8 by 8 inches. Finally, pulling a utility knife from the desk drawer, I edged toward the dresser. The box was sitting exactly where Sarah had put it. I spent over a minute staring at the designs on it, biting my lip nervously. Then, I slowly reached out and tapped the lid twice with my finger. God, I'm acting like an idiot. Of course there's no one in there. But I was so scared. Taking a deep breath, I flipped the lid back in one quick motion. Inside lay my wife's jewelry, untouched. I let out a quiet laugh at my own stupid fear. I must have imagined it. It was those damn horror movies. That's it, time for bed, or I'll start having nightmares next. On Saturday morning, I was jolted awake by a piercing scream from my wife. I sat up abruptly, looking around the room. Sunlight was filtering through the gap in the curtains. The clock on the wall said 9 a.m. What's going on? Alex. I flinched at the sound of Sarah's sobbing voice. I didn't see her from the bed at first. She was kneeling on the floor in front of the rabbit hutch, gasping for air between sobs. Before I could even process anything, I leaped out of bed and rushed to her. Are you okay? Should I call an ambulance? No. With a trembling hand, she pointed to the bars of the hutch. Snowy, she's dead. A cold chill washed over me. I tore my gaze away from Sarah and looked at the hutch. The rabbit was lying on her back, motionless. Her eyes were bulging, her mouth was open. It was clear she was dead because her neck was twisted at a sickening, broken angle. My God, I whispered, looking into the rabbit's glassy pink eyes. Who would do this?
Who do you think?
Sarah snapped suddenly, hitting me in the leg with her fist.
Who was the one threatening to kill her, to make a collar for his jacket out of her fur and turn her meat into stew?
It was true. Who else out of the three of us had a motive to snap poor Snowy's neck? But for Ben, my younger brother, who I thought I knew inside and out, to go through with the cold-blooded killing of a pet? I guess I didn't know him as well as I thought. Why are you guys screaming so early in the morning? Right on cue, Ben opened the door without knocking. He was standing there in just his boxers, his hair a mess from sleep, with pillow marks on his face and bits of the sheets stuck to him. Sarah stood up, leaning both hands on the hutch, and glared at him with a fury I had never seen before. Never in all our years together. Her face was contorted with rage. She was baring her teeth like a rabid dog. She was shaking. Ben glanced at her indifferently, then looked at the rabbit's body and made a fatal mistake. He chuckled. Oh, looks like the long ears finally croaked. Screaming with rage, Sarah lunged at Ben, clearly intending to claw his eyes out. I managed to catch her and hold her back. I was more worried about my wife than that idiot. Her face was already bright red. Her blood pressure must have been through the roof. Struggling unsuccessfully to break free from my grip, Sarah screamed at the frozen Ben, swearing at him and accusing him of murdering her favorite rabbit. Are you guys crazy? He yelled, finally snapping out of it. I didn't even touch her, but honestly, good riddance. I've wanted to snap her head off for a long time. That was the final straw. That's enough, I roared at my brother, and he jumped. I rarely ever raised my voice. I pointed toward the front door. Get out of here. I don't want to see you in my house ever again. Fine, go to hell, Ben screamed back. You and your fat cow of a wife. I hate you both. While I was calming down my sobbing, hysterical wife, I could hear my brother running around his room, hurriedly getting dressed and cursing us both. I should have found the strength to kick him out a long time ago. It never would have come to this. Ben ran out of the apartment, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled, shouting one last insult at us as he left. I spent nearly an hour giving Sarah sedatives. I offered to call an ambulance several times, but she refused. Once she finally fell asleep, I carefully took the rabbit's body out of the hutch and placed it in a shoebox. I took it down to the river and buried it deep in a small grave so the stray dogs wouldn't dig it up. The rest of the day was spent in a state of mourning. I barely managed to convince Sarah to eat, insisting it was for the baby. The next day I took my shell-shocked wife for a walk in the park, then to a movie to see a kid's cartoon. She needed a distraction. She needed to recover. I couldn't let her grief affect James. That evening I called my boss, explained the situation, and took a few days off. Leaving Sarah alone in her state was too risky. In the middle of the night, my eyes snapped open. I stared blankly at the ceiling, having no idea what had woken me. I tilted my head and looked at Sarah. She was sleeping peacefully on her side, her hands tucked under her cheek. I instinctively looked at the hutch and then remembered with a pang of guilt that it was empty now. I should have taken it apart during the day so we wouldn't have to look at it. From the left side of the room, where the dresser was, I heard 3 distinct clicks. A wave of ice-cold dread washed over me from the top of my head down. I recognized those sounds. I'd heard them before. Slowly, I shifted my gaze from the hutch to the dresser. Even though the room was dark, I could clearly see that the damn box was open. With a sound like dry rustling leaves, thin black strands began to crawl out of it. No, they weren't strands. They were long black hairs. They spilled around the box, hanging off the dresser. Behind them emerged a stark white, high forehead and 2 insane, massive eyes. They scanned the bedroom quickly and locked onto me. The clicking started again, and the head continued to emerge from the box. A thin, upturned nose appeared, then dark, pursed lips. A thin neck followed with the sound of snapping bones. The head lolled to the side, the mouth opened slightly, letting out a stifled gasp and that same clicking sound. Long, spindly fingers reached out of the box, touched the pale chin, and gripped the edge of the wood. With my heart hammering at a frantic pace, I watched as something crawled out of that Japanese box. I was drenched in sweat. Internally, I was screaming in hysterics, my eyes bulging, but I couldn't move. Not a single muscle in my body would obey the command from my brain. Get up now. A prisoner of my own fear, I was forced to watch as a hideous woman entered our room, impossibly emerging from that small box. Leaning her white, bony hands on the dresser, she twisted her head with a sickening crunch. Her hair fell in messy tangles over a gray, filthy nightgown. In one sudden lunge, she vaulted out of the box, hitting the floor with a heavy thud. I inhaled sharply and held my breath. Where was she? Was she on the floor, or had she vanished? I heard a quiet rustling. Something was crawling on the carpet. White female fingers, almost glowing in the dark, gripped the foot of the bed. Then that terrifying face appeared with its black, gaping mouth. The woman's head was twitching with the sound of grinding cervical vertebrae. Wheezing and clicking, the monster crawled onto the bed. Her arms splayed out at unnatural angles. I could feel the mattress dipping under her weight. I felt her heavy palm land on my leg, pinning it down. The cold dread turned into a suffocating heat. It felt like I was burning from the inside out from the sheer horror of it, but I couldn't even manage a whimper. Her face stopped right at my chest. Her head turned toward Sarah with a bone-deep crunch. A loud buzz from the intercom snapped me out of the paralysis. Gasping for air, I sat up abruptly. There was no hideous woman on the bed. There was no one in the room at all. And the box was tightly closed. Woken by the intercom, Sarah groaned and shifted under the covers. Someone buzzed a second time, insistently. So, it was just a nightmare? It felt so real, but of course it couldn't have been real. It was that thing. Sleep paralysis. Yeah, that had to be it. There was no other explanation. "Who the hell is that?" Sarah grumbled, sitting up. "Alex, can you check?" Yeah, okay." Wiping the sweat from my forehead, I stumbled into the hallway. After that nightmare, I was even afraid to look through the peephole. But it was just my brother, dead drunk. How had he even made it home in that state? I couldn't just leave him in the hall. I didn't want the neighbors to see. I opened the door and Ben literally fell into my arms. Grabbing him under the armpits, I dragged my beloved brother to his room. He still had enough energy to mumble something. Sarah came into the hallway to watch the scene. Fortunately, she didn't say anything, she just shook her head. After dumping him on the couch, I went back to bed, but not before taking a heavy dose of sedatives. I was still shaking from the nightmare. Thanks to the meds, I slept until noon. Sarah had already made breakfast and had managed to fight with Ben twice. He wouldn't say anything about his 2-day bender, and when she asked him why he killed Snowy, he just snarled that he didn't do it. The bastard didn't even have the courage to admit what he'd done. He was completely dead to me now. "Listen up," I started, going back into his room after breakfast. Ben gave me a sour, sidelong look from the computer desk. "I'm giving you 1 week to find a new place. We're done with your behavior. Killing Snowy was the last straw." He tried to argue, but I shut him down hard. "The free ride is over, Ben. Welcome to the real world. I don't care if you find an apartment in a week or not. I promise you, I will throw you out myself. Do you understand me?" I didn't hear his answer. He just growled something through his teeth. If he thought I was joking or that I'd go soft after the week was up, he was dead wrong. I had made up my mind to get my arrogant brother out of the house. Sarah and I spent almost the whole day walking in the park. We had lunch at her favorite cafe, then went down to the river. Sarah asked tentatively where I'd buried the rabbit, but I refused to take her to the grave. She would have just started crying again. We got home late that afternoon. Ben had cleared out somewhere, but judging by his stuff, he wasn't gone for good. I went into the kitchen to heat up some dinner, and Sarah, exhausted from the walk, wanted to lie down for a bit. A few minutes later, I heard her call my name with a strange tension in her voice. "Alex, what is this?" she asked in an odd tone, pointing at our unmade bed. At first, I didn't understand what was bothering her, so I walked closer. When I saw it, it felt like an electric shock. On the pale sheets lay a clump of long black hair. Exactly like the hair of that. No, it can't be. It was just a dream. What is the meaning of this? Sarah picked up the tangled hair with 2 fingers, looking disgusted. "While we're out of the house, this jerk is bringing girls over and messing around in our bed. Alex, this is the final straw." I shook my head in disapproval. Yeah, it was a perfectly logical explanation, and it was exactly the kind of thing Ben would do. He must have sensed the confrontation coming and didn't show up. He didn't answer his phone. He just sent a short text saying he was at a friend's place and was staying the night. Honestly, Sarah and I were fine with that. I changed the sheets, and Sarah demanded that I throw the old ones away. As I was stuffing the crumpled sheets into a trash bag, I glanced at that cursed box. I really don't like that thing. It smells weird. Maybe I should just take it to the dumpster? Alex. Sarah put her hands on her hips, annoyed. I know you can't stand Chloe, but that was a gift. It's expensive, it's imported. You can't just throw it away. Fine, honey. Don't get worked up. I'll try to get over it. I woke up in the middle of the night again. Before I was even fully conscious, I heard my wife whimpering. I opened my eyes and blinked rapidly, trying to figure out what was happening. First, I saw Sarah. She was lying on her back, tossing her head from side to side in her sleep. Her hair was matted to her sweaty forehead. I blinked again and propped myself up. Sitting on Sarah's legs was a pale woman in a filthy nightgown. Her hair was draped over her face, barely revealing insane eyes and a twisted mouth. Her hands, with splayed fingers, were resting on Sarah's belly, stroking it. And then, they suddenly sank deeper, right through the duvet, up to the wrists. The monster's mouth opened wide and the room filled with a raspy wheeze. Immediately after, Sarah let out a blood-curdling scream and her eyes flew open. The paralysis vanished instantly. I leaped out of bed, throwing the duvet to the floor. The terrifying woman was gone, and the only thing left was the sound of the box lid slamming shut. My wife's nightgown was intact. No holes, no damage. But the new sheets between Sarah's legs were soaked in blood. The ambulance arrived quickly and took us both. The paramedics and then the doctor told us everything would be okay. Yes, it was premature labor, and yes, Sarah had a placental abruption that hadn't been diagnosed for some reason, but the baby was well developed and viable. Shortly after Sarah was taken into surgery, both our parents arrived at the hospital. All four of them were comforting me, saying everything would be fine, that babies were born at this stage all the time. They said today I was going to be a father. I wasn't. James didn't make it. He suffocated. The doctors couldn't revive him. I don't know how long. I sat in the waiting room, numbed by the news. I vaguely heard that Sarah was in critical condition and had lost a lot of blood. Someone told me I should go home and sleep, that they wouldn't let me into the ICU to see her anyway. How could I leave her? Time became a blur. I didn't know if hours or days were passing. At some point, our parents finally led me outside, put me in a car, and drove me home to the apartment Sarah and I shared. I only came to my senses for a moment when I stepped through the door. Ben gave me a somber hug and said some words of support. I didn't remember them. My father left eventually, but my mother stayed for a while, feeding Ben and me something, I don't know what. It felt like I'd fallen asleep in the hospital waiting room and was now walking through a permanent fog. I didn't want to do anything. I just sat in the living room in front of the TV, staring blankly at the screen. Ben would come in often and ask if I needed anything. Of course I did. I needed to wake up and for Sarah and James to be okay. A sharp sound pulled me out of the haze. It took me a second to realize I'd dropped the remote on the floor. The living room was dark. Some movie was playing on the TV. I fumbled for my phone on the couch and checked the screen. It was 1:30 a.m. My mouth was bone dry, and as much as I didn't want to move, I needed to go to the kitchen for some water. I stood up heavily, my legs feeling like lead, as if I'd aged decades in the last few days. I shuffled down the hallway in my slippers. The door to our bedroom was ajar, and I could see the glow of the computer monitor through the crack. Ben, as usual, I heard some strange sounds coming from the room. Was he playing without headphones? I grabbed the doorknob and pushed the door open. Ben was lying on his back, his arms splayed out, his eyes staring wide at the ceiling. His mouth was stretched open to its limit, his tongue lolling to the side. Sitting on my brother's chest was a pale creature with black hair. Her fingers were clamped tightly around his throat. The head of the woman who had crawled out of the cursed box snapped back with a crunch, her hair sliding away from her face, and her gaze locked onto me. Her dark lips stretched into a long, hideous smile, and I screamed at the top of my lungs. After that, the fog returned. I don't remember calling the police or the ambulance. I don't remember when they arrived. I was taken somewhere and questioned for a long time. I answered distractedly, often making no sense. Eventually, they let me go. They said the fingerprints on Ben's throat didn't match mine. It turns out I'd been in custody for 4 days. I was released just in time for my brother's funeral. That, too, was a blur. I remember my mother sobbing, my father's voice telling me to stay strong. I remember my grandfather's tearful embrace and the comfort of my friends. I remember Sarah calling from the hospital and Chloe sobbing on my chest. That damn box. I'd completely forgotten about it in all the worry over Sarah. If I had gone home right away and thrown it out, no, burned it, my brother would still be alive. I found myself in the bedroom, standing in front of the dresser. It was sitting in the same spot, looking like a simple, beautiful jewelry box. I grabbed it and violently dumped out all of Sarah's treasures. They spilled onto the floor, but I didn't care. "Oh, what are you doing?" I jumped at the sound of my mother's voice. I stared at her in surprise. I didn't know she was still at the apartment. "Yeah, it's just me." I looked down at the cursed Japanese box in my hands. A gift? Damn it. An imported gift from Chloe. "Mom, I have something I need to do. I'll be back soon." "Alex." My mother moved into the doorway, blocking the hall. "Don't do anything stupid. First Sarah, then Ben. Don't you do anything crazy. Don't worry." I gave her a quick kiss on the cheek. "I promise. I'll be back in an hour." Sarah's friend Chloe lived only 2 stops away. I sent her a quick text saying I wanted to talk, and she agreed immediately. And even though she'd been crying her eyes out just this morning, Chloe met me at the door with a full face of makeup, wearing a short leopard print robe. "Alex, I'm so sorry," she cried out with a misplaced smile and tried to hug me. I stepped back, awkwardly adjusting the strap of my bag. Chloe didn't seem bothered. "Come in, I have some bourbon. You need to relax." "Thanks, I won't be long." I went into the living room and sat on the couch, glancing at the bottle on the table. Chloe sat down next to me, crossing her legs so that her robe slid up. "Listen, I have a weird question for you. Where did you get that box? You know, the one with the cranes that you gave Sarah?" Chloe's face changed instantly. Her eyes darted around in a panic. She licked her lips, shifted her position, and grabbed my hand, starting to speak in a fast, frantic whisper.
I did it for you. I took that box from the cursed forest. Only for you. I've loved you since 1st grade. I loved you from the very first moment. And you chose that cow, Sarah. She's not right for you. She tried to trap you with that pregnancy. But it's okay. It didn't work. And I'm so sorry, Alex. Your brother wasn't supposed to die. That was an accident. It's just, she didn't understand who was in your way. She was supposed to get rid of Sarah and the baby.
My hand moved on its own. My fist slammed into Chloe's jaw. Her teeth clicked together loudly. She slumped to the floor, unconscious. I stood up, stepped over her, and went into the bedroom, unzipping my bag. I knelt down by her wide bed and, reaching under it, shoved the Japanese box deep against the wall. You smiled as the lid clicked open slightly, followed by that familiar clicking sound. Sweet dreams, Chloe. The small flatbed truck that brought Elena to her new home came to a halt by the rusted gate. The driver climbed lazily out of the cab, squinted at the house, and lit a cigarette. He clearly had no intention of helping her. Elena hauled the boxes out of the truck bed herself, paid the man in silence, and watched him drive away, leaving nothing behind but clouds of dust hanging over the road. Elena scanned the street and shivered. A man had stepped out of the house directly opposite hers. He stood there, watching her intently. He had bushy eyebrows, some thick black beard, and a heavy, sullen gaze. Elena raised her hand to wave hello, but there was no response. The man continued to stare, not moving a muscle. Elena felt a chill crawl down her spine. I hope the other neighbors are friendlier, she thought, as she walked toward the gate. The house sat deep within the lot, hiding behind thick thickets of lilac and overgrown berry bushes. It looked as if it had been waiting for its owners for a long time. The paint was sun-bleached, covered in fine cracks. The shutters hung slightly crooked, yet the building felt sturdy, solid. Elena took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of freshly cut grass and the bittersweet tang of blooming apple trees. Here, the sounds were different. The lazy hum of bees, the chirp of crickets, free and peaceful. She stepped onto the porch and it gave a faint groan under her weight. Inside, but the house was simple, large, airy. It smelled of dry wood and something else, something old, but pleasant, like a childhood memory. The bedroom impressed her most. It was flooded with soft light, but the main feature was the window. Large, almost taking up the entire wall. It looked straight into the garden, through the clouded glass. She could see the lilac bushes, the old apple trees, and a path of flat stones. The view was so peaceful that Elena caught her breath. She unlatched the lock and swung the windows open. Fresh air rushed in, but for a fleeting second, she thought she saw someone standing in the depths of the garden, hidden in the thick shadows of the trees. She squinted, looking closer, but saw no one. Only the branches, swaying in the breeze. She stepped back and closed the window, listening to the quiet click of the lock. For some reason, she felt calmer with the glass separating her from the garden, like it could protect her from whatever was lurking in the shadows. The first few days flew by, but the bearded man across the street continued to unnerve her. He watched her house for hours. Every town has its eccentrics, she told herself. Yet, as she fell asleep, she often found herself turning her head toward the window, making sure the garden was still there. It wasn't quite anxiety, it was an expectation. Then she began waking up at night. At night, the window would fog up. A thin, even veil of moisture covered the glass, as if someone had been breathing on it from the outside for a long time. One morning, and she froze. On the fogged glass, there was a clear mark, a small handprint of a child. Elena touched it instinctively, but pulled her hand back immediately, wiping her fingers on her pajamas, as if she had touched something forbidden. The following night, she didn't sleep. She listened to the silence. At some point, she heard soft, cautious footsteps circling the house. Elena sat up in bed, straining her eyes in the dark. Silence fell again, and then came a quiet, persistent tap on the glass. Elena jumped up and tore back the curtain, but there was only the motionless garden and shadows. Terrified, she called the police. The local deputy looked around and simply shrugged. Footprints in the grass? Staring isn't a crime, Elena. There's no case here. As the police car pulled away, a voice startled her. "Hello, dear. Something wrong?" An older woman, Valerie, stood by the fence. Elena told her everything. The tapping, the handprints. Valerie sighed. "Don't fear Silas, but that house, the people who lived there before you, were strange, unfriendly, and they had a daughter, a girl, about 8 or 9. Valerie's voice dropped. "At night, we heard sounds, crying, screaming. One night, I saw her standing barefoot under that window, shivering, tapping on the glass and whispering, 'Please, let me in.' Elena felt sick. And the girl? She was a miracle, Valerie said. So kind, so sweet. And then she just vanished. The parents said she ran away. They packed up and left the very next day. The house sat empty for a long time. No one wanted to live there. And now, there's you." That night, Elena couldn't sleep. She sat in the darkness. Suddenly, the mist began to crawl across the glass. The window was fogging up again. Elena leaned in and saw a child's face pressed against the pane. The girl was beautiful, but her eyes, they were unnaturally black, like coal-colored voids in her pale skin. The girl raised her hands and mouthed the words, "Let me in." Elena recoiled in horror. This wasn't a living child. This was something else. The next night, Elena didn't run. She sat and waited. At midnight, the girl appeared from the mist. She pointed to the ground beneath the window. Then she faded away. In the morning, thus, Elena found a strange, pale flower growing exactly where the girl had pointed. Elena grabbed a shovel. She began to dig. The shovel hit something hard. She began clawing at the dirt with her bare hands. She found a wooden lid. She pried it open, and the stench of rot filled the air. Inside were tiny, fragile bones, a scrap of a blue ribbon. But what horrified Elena most were the scratches, deep, frantic scratches on the inside of the lid. The girl hadn't run away. Her parents had buried her, alive. Elena felt a surge of pity and rage. She believed the girl wanted peace. That night, when the mist appeared, Elena stood at the window, and opened it wide. "I let you in," she said. Instantly, the girl's face changed. The black eyes turned into glowing embers of hate. Her mouth stretched into a jagged, needle-toothed grin. Elena tried to pull back, but it was too late. The entity dissolved into a black chill and surged into her. Visions flooded Elena's mind. Monstrous memories. She saw the girl smiling as she set fire to houses. She heard cold laughter as she slaughtered animals just to watch the life leave their eyes. The parents hadn't buried a child. They had buried a demon. Elena felt her soul being pushed into a dark corner. Her limbs were no longer hers. A soft, childish voice whispered inside her head, dripping with icy triumph, "Thank you for letting me in." Later that night, Valerie was awakened by a pounding at her door. It was Elena, trembling. But as Valerie turned to get some tea, she saw Elena standing there with a heavy meat cleaver. A predatory grin was on her face. "Elena, what are you doing?" Elena laughed, a hollow, terrifying sound. Valerie tried to run, but Elena tackled her with impossible strength. The blade swung. Suddenly, a shot rang out. Elena slumped to the side. Silas, the neighbor, stood there with a shotgun. "I knew," he rasped. "I saw her years ago, with that look in her eyes. I've been waiting." Silas stood on the porch, lighting a cigarette, trembling. But when he looked back to check the body, his heart stopped. The spot where Elena had fallen was empty. There was no body, no blood, only the grass, slowly straightening up, as if the earth itself had swallowed the evidence. Someone was in the bathroom. I was sure of it because a faint rustling sound drifted through the cracked door. I approached slowly and pushed the door wider. It let out a piercing screech. It felt like everything in this ancient house was designed to make revolting sounds, creaks, squelches, whistles. A shower curtain mottled with black mold hid the bathtub. Something was behind it. Murky shadows danced, taking on grotesque shapes. With a trembling hand, I grabbed the edge of the curtain, yanked it back, and immediately recoiled. I was ready for anything, but not this. In the tub lay a bird. Its wing was shattered, one leg torn off. Where the head should have been, there was only a raw, bloody stump. Barely holding back a surge of vomit, I grabbed a rag from the towel rack, wrapped the bird's body in it, went out to the back alley, and tossed the thing into the trash compactor. Then for a long time, I scrubbed the blood from the porcelain, watching the rust-colored streaks disappear into a drain clogged with gray hair. I had been in this house for a week. This was my maternal grandmother's place, Evelyn Vance, my only living relative, and even that wasn't for long. Evelyn and I never really talked. As a kid, she terrified me. She was cold, strict, and would often stare at me for minutes without blinking, as if she were calculating something. She felt different, not like other people, and that filled me with dread. She used to have these episodes. Her eyes would roll back until they were pitch black, and a pale pink foam would leak from her mouth. She'd collapse onto the floor, body contorted in convulsions, screaming in a voice that was way too deep to be hers. When I first saw it at age 7, I was paralyzed with fear. My mom explained it was epilepsy, but later in life, after seeing actual epileptic patients, I realized that what Evelyn had was something else entirely. My grandmother was always sick, so my mom spent all her time here. Sometimes she stayed for weeks to care for her. And then one day, my mom just vanished. She said she was going to Evelyn's house. And she did. Neighbors saw her enter, but she never came out. No one ever saw her again. My dad told me she abandoned us. He started drinking heavily, and a few years later, I was barely 18, he got hit by a car while drunk. Since then, I've been alone, well, except for Evelyn. Now I live with her. We hadn't seen each other in years until I got a call from the county hospital. The doctor spoke with cold professionalism. He said Evelyn Vance, who had just turned 85, was admitted with a rare terminal condition. There was no cure. She didn't have much time. I had 2 choices, a hospice facility or caring for her myself. In my estimation, we're looking at weeks, the doctor said. You're the sole heir. It's your call, but a good hospice isn't cheap. It was a tough spot. Either spend weeks with a dying old woman I barely knew or leave her to rot. I couldn't afford a hospice. My paycheck barely covered my own studio apartment and groceries. On the other hand, Evelyn owned a large 3-story house in the historic district on Oak Street. If I stayed with her until the end, the inheritance would be mine. If I walked away, she might sign the deed over to someone else. When I went to the hospital and saw her, something twitched inside me. She lay in the bed, withered, tiny. She looked like she might just dissolve into the air. I felt pity, but at the same time I thought, how am I going to do this? I had no idea how to care for someone. I'd have to wash her, change her sheets. The thought made me shiver with disgust. When I reached her bedside, she opened her eyes. A weak smile touched her lips. She took my hand and said something barely audible. I leaned in and caught only 3 sentences. Forgive me, grandson. I'm so grateful. Just don't leave me. You're all I have left. A single tear rolled down her dry cheek. I squeezed her hand and made up my mind. I would spend these last weeks with her. I won't lie. The inheritance was a huge part of it. And yes, the thought of what I'd have to do was repulsive. But in the end, she was the only blood I had left. I sincerely wanted to make her final days bearable. The next day I moved her back home, packed my bags, and moved in. No life with her turned into a living hell. The episodes were now much more frequent, happening every few days. She would collapse, twitching and screaming in that horrific alien voice, while I had to hold her down and pray for it to end quickly. Following the doctor's orders, she was supposed to take pills several times a day, but she fought me, spitting them out, even biting me twice. The house was a wreck. Roaches scurried across the kitchen counters. A hideous water stain marred the ceiling. Mold was everywhere. Towers of old newspapers and junk she had hoarded for years were piled in every room. I just cleared a small corner in the living room and slept there, hoping she would pass away soon so our mutual torture would end. Then came that strange discovery. The headless bird in the bathtub. I decided to talk to her about it. The door to Evelyn's bedroom was ajar, and a raspy, uneven breath drifted out. The room was revolting. The air was thick with the smell of urine, sweat, and something else, the scent of death. "Grandma?" I called out. She stared at me without blinking. "Did you see a dead bird in the bathroom? Its head was missing." "I don't know anything," she wheezed. "Just let me die in peace. Don't torment me." As I left, I saw a tiny red smudge at the corner of her mouth. I told myself it was just my imagination. A few days later, while she was sleeping, I found a locked drawer in her desk. I saw a small key hanging on a chain around her neck. As I tried to take it, she snapped her eyes open. They were solid black. She roared like an animal and lunged at my throat. For a frail woman, she had terrifying strength. Afterward, she collapsed into tears, claiming she thought I was a burglar. On Saturday during her bath, I finally managed to steal the key. I ran to her room and opened the drawer. Inside were at least a dozen headless rats, dried skins, decaying flesh, and black blood. Beneath them was a photograph, a calendar from my kindergarten days. My birthday, February 19th, was circled repeatedly in red ink. That night, I saw her catch a cockroach and bite its head off. She smiled, a faint flush appearing on her cheeks. Later, I woke up to find her standing over my bed laughing a wet, bubbling laugh. A kitchen knife was now lying on my nightstand. The next evening, I saw trails of blood in the hallway. In the living room, dozens of candles were lit. A circle of blood and strange symbols covered the floor. Evelyn stood in the center, chanting in a tongue that sounded like choking. She slashed my arm, smeared my blood on her face, and licked it greedily. We struggled, she hit her head, and another episode began. Pink foam, convulsions, and then silence. No pulse. She was dead. I called 911. My grandmother, Evelyn Vance, just passed away. But when I went back to the room, the body was gone. The lights died. A tall, hunched silhouette with glowing white eyes and long claws stood against the window. It lunged. I struck at those white eyes with the knife I still held. "Grandma?" I called out. She stared at me without blinking. "Did you see a dead bird in the bathroom? Its head was missing." "I don't know anything," she wheezed. "Just let me die in peace. Don't torment me." As I left, I saw a tiny red smudge at the corner of her mouth. I told myself it was just my imagination. A few days later, while she was sleeping, I found a locked drawer in her desk. I saw a small key hanging on a chain around her neck. As I tried to take it, she snapped her eyes open. They were solid black. She roared like an animal and lunged at my throat. For a frail woman, she had terrifying strength. Afterward, she collapsed into tears, claiming she thought I was a burglar. On Saturday, during her bath, I finally managed to steal the key. I ran to her room and opened the drawer. Inside were at least a dozen headless rats. Dried skins, decaying flesh, and black blood. Beneath them was a photograph, a calendar from my kindergarten days. My birthday, February 19th, was circled repeatedly in red ink. That night, I saw her catch a cockroach and bite its head off. She smiled, a faint flush appearing on her cheeks. Later, I woke up to find her standing over my bed laughing a wet, bubbling laugh. A kitchen knife was now lying on my nightstand. The next evening, I saw trails of blood in the hallway. In the living room, dozens of candles were lit. A circle of blood and strange symbols covered the floor. Evelyn stood in the center, chanting in a tongue that sounded like choking. She slashed my arm, smeared my blood on her face, and licked it greedily. We struggled as she hit her head, and another episode began. Pink foam, convulsions, and then silence. No pulse. She was dead. I called 911. My grandmother, Evelyn Vance, just passed away. But when I went back to the room, the body was gone. The lights died. A tall, hunched silhouette with glowing white eyes and long claws stood against the window. It lunged. I struck at those white eyes with the knife I still held. A flash of light. Silence. The electricity came back. On the floor lay a withered gray husk. She was finally truly dead. I smiled. I stood up, smoothing out my shirt, getting used to my new height and my strong, youthful limbs. It was a shame a female body wasn't available. I'd grown quite used to it over the years. But this one would do. "Happy birthday to me," I whispered. I looked around and nodded. It was a very good birthday indeed. The first time I saw the lady in white was exactly a week after I started working at the hotel. It happened just before midnight. I was pulling the graveyard shift at the front desk, and the lobby was drowning in a heavy silence broken only by the rhythmic ticking of an ancient grandfather clock on the wall. She appeared at the foot of the grand staircase, standing perfectly still. Her long white dress was so long, the lace trim pooled on the dark carpet. The fabric of her skirt fluttered slightly as if caught in a draft, even though every heavy oak door in the building was bolted shut. Her face was so pale it bled into the whiteness of her gown, and her hands were pressed tight against her chest, as if she were desperately trying to hold something inside. Her gaze drifted right past me, staring into the emptiness behind the counter. There was nothing in those eyes, nothing but a vast, faded sorrow. I remember thinking she was probably some guest's mistress. You see that a lot in this business. Men on business trips, bringing along beautiful, hollow-eyed companions. They usually have those tired, obedient faces, not knowing what to do with themselves, while their partners are busy closing multi-million-dollar deals in the conference rooms. This woman looked exactly like that. Lost, exhausted, a typical guest forgotten in this labyrinth of gold leaf, mahogany, and expensive perfume. I figured she'd just stepped out for some air. I even gave her a polite nod and murmured, "Good evening, ma'am." She didn't flinch. A second later, she stepped into the shadows and simply vanished, melted away. I rubbed my eyes, chalking it up to a hallucination brought on by exhaustion. The shift had been brutal. If only I knew then how dead wrong I was. I got the night porter job at the Maison Rouge thanks to Marcus. He was the general manager and my direct boss. We'd been friends since high school, back when we were smoking behind the gym and dreaming of making it big, but life had different plans. By the time he hit 30, Marcus had it all. The tailored suits, the salary, the respect. Meanwhile, I'd spent the last 6 months drifting, crashing in a damp studio where the walls smelled of cheap grease and failure. My savings had dried up back in the spring. I was taking any odd job I could find, handing out flyers, unloading crates at the docks. Marcus called just as I was reading yet another "thank you for your interest" rejection email. He told me there was an opening, night shift, good pay plus meals. I didn't even have to think about it. Even after he warned me 3 times that the job was nerve-wracking, it was still better than breaking my back at the warehouse. The hotel had only recently reopened. It was high-end, classic, with that kind of old-world opulence that makes you feel like you're walking through a museum. Crystal chandeliers cast dancing flickers on the marble floors. Thick rugs swallowed every footstep. Every piece of furniture was hand-carved dark wood, smelling of beeswax and old money. Sometimes I felt like an intruder there. I fumbled through the protocols at first, forgetting the proper way to address the VIPs. But Marcus would just wink and say, "Don't sweat it, Sam. You'll get the hang of it." I was grateful down to my bones. This was a lucky break, like winning the lottery. I knew if I blew this, I'd never forgive myself. The place was intimate, only 20 rooms spread across 3 floors. It was an old mansion, a relic from over a century ago, once owned by a wealthy cotton merchant. I didn't pay much attention to the history at first. Marcus gave me the grand tour, rambling about architectural landmarks and cultural heritage. He told me the place had sat abandoned for 50 years until some history buffs with deep pockets bought it and restored it. He talked endlessly about the crown molding and the unique facade, but one detail stuck in my mind. At the very top was an attic, or a mezzanine, as Marcus called it. The entrance was boarded up. When I asked if it was for storage, Marcus just brushed it off. "It's just an old bedroom," he said. "During the restoration, they found the floorboards were rotted through. The structural integrity is shot. It would cost a fortune to fix, so it's easier to just keep it locked." He paused, then gave a dry chuckle. "Local legend says it was the mistress's bedroom. They say her ghost wanders up there at night, looking for souls to drag into the dark." We both laughed. He laughed loud, I laughed nervously. "You don't believe in ghosts, do you, Sam?" he teased. "Of course not," I replied instantly. But for some reason my voice betrayed me with a slight tremor. I worked the graveyard shifts 9 to 9. Over time I learned the art of being a ghost myself. Always nearby, but never intrusive. You learn to read a guest's mood by a single glance. Our guests were a mixed bag: bankers with locked briefcases, actresses with trunks of makeup, foreigners struggling with the menu. Some were eccentric, others were just plain weird. One guy demanded his room be cleaned only at 3 a.m. Another ordered a bone-in ribeye, rare, at exactly 5 o'clock in the morning, then complained if the blood didn't soak the plate. Another guest forbade anyone from entering his room for his entire stay. Private business, he'd say, and we'd hear a strange, mechanical hum coming from inside, but we never found out what it was. The maids had it the worst. Some rooms took hours to scrub down, cleaning up unidentifiable stains or shaking strange debris out of the linens. Sometimes things were just inexplicable. Once, after a couple checked out, we found the room in total shambles. Furniture overturned, lamps shattered, carpets shredded. Yet nobody, not even the neighbors, heard a single sound. Another time, a maid found a litter of 6 gray kittens in a room. We have a strict no pets policy, and the guest, an old man with a silver beard, swore he never brought a cat. They just appeared, he said, and left a tip so huge we had no choice but to believe him. Then there was the old man who ordered dinner for 2 every night, even though he lived alone. The maids whispered that they heard 2 voices behind his door, but we never saw anyone else enter. The Maison Rouge was a place where reality seemed to glitch like an old machine. But I liked it. After a couple of months, I felt like I belonged in this world of secrets and midnight silence. One night around 2 a.m., the phone at the front desk shrieked. I grabbed the receiver, trying to sound awake. "Front desk, good evening. How may I help you?" A man's voice, low and irritated, came through. "There's a howling coming from the room next door. It's been going on for an hour. I can't sleep. Do something about it." Room 204. I made a note in the log, straightened my tie, and grabbed the master key. Routine stuff. But as I headed for the stairs, a cold knot of anxiety tightened in my chest. I walked down the second-floor hallway. The carpet muffled my footsteps. The wall sconces cast long, finger-like shadows. I heard the sound before I even reached the door. It wasn't howling, as the guest had put it. It was something else. A muffled, gut-wrenching sobbing. A woman's cry echoing with a hollow, desperate grief. It was coming from room 203. I frowned. That room was supposed to be vacant. The previous guest had checked out that morning and no one else had checked in. I thought maybe the clerk made a mistake. I knocked gently. The crying didn't stop. It only got faster, more frantic, as if she heard me and was terrified. Maybe it was a maid? They have keys, but they never clean this late. I knocked harder. No response. On instinct, I reached for the doorknob. It was unnervingly cold and damp, like a block of ice. The door wasn't locked. It swung open with a soft creak. As soon as I stepped inside, the crying stopped instantly. The room was bathed in shadows. The curtains were drawn, the bed was perfectly made, and a faint floral scent, like old perfume, hung in the air. "Excuse me, is someone there?" I called out, flipping the light switch. The bulb flickered, illuminating the room. Everything was in its place. Not a thing was disturbed. Only the sheer curtains at the window fluttered slightly, though there was no breeze. The windows were locked tight. I walked through the room, checked the bathroom. The white tiles were gleaming, the towels hung straight. The closet was empty. No one was there. I went back to the desk on shaky legs. The guest from 204 called again. "What's the status?" I lied. I told him it was just a misunderstanding, that the neighbor was fine now. I spent the rest of the night jumping at every shadow. What was that? A hallucination? But the guest had heard it too. Someone was in that room. And then they just evaporated. And the doorknob? Why was it so cold? I rubbed my temples. I needed to check the security tapes. In the morning, I slipped out to the 24-hour convenience store across the street for a pack of cigarettes. I only smoke when my nerves are shot, and right then they were frayed to a thread. That sobbing was stuck in my head like a splinter. As I walked back toward the hotel, I looked up and froze. There, in the window of the boarded-up mezzanine, someone was standing. A thin, pale figure. A woman in white. Her silhouette was blurred, like a reflection in dirty glass. But that room was locked. I'd seen the heavy padlock myself, a lock I didn't even have a key for. I blinked, and she was gone. I'm tired, I thought. I'm just seeing things because Marcus told me that stupid story. After handing over the shift to my relief, I went into Marcus's office. He was drinking coffee, scrolling through his tablet. "Hey Marcus, we had a weird call last night," I started, closing the door. "Guest in 204 complained about noise." I went up and I heard a woman crying in 203, but the room was empty when I went in. Marcus set his mug down, arching an eyebrow. "Ghosts again, Sam?" He smiled, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes. Fear. I didn't smile back. "It's not funny. Maybe someone broke in through the balcony. Let's check the cameras." He didn't argue. He sent me to the security office. It was a cramped room that smelled of stale coffee and sweat. I sat down with one of the guards, a balding guy with a faded tattoo on his wrist. He insisted no one suspicious had entered the halls all night, but I told him I needed to see for myself. We pulled up the footage from the second-floor hallway. 2 a.m. "See?" the guard said. "Nobody. Just you showing up, knocking, and going in." "Wait, roll it back," I whispered, leaning closer to the screen. There I was in my uniform, key in hand. I knocked, pushed the door, and entered. "Stop! Right there!" I shouted, my fingers digging into the armrest. The frame froze. There, right next to me at the door, was a white blur, a faint, hazy shape, like a patch of mist had coalesced right at my shoulder. The guard shrugged. "Just a glitch in the digital recording. Happens all the time." I forced myself to nod. Yeah, just a glitch. But my legs felt like lead as I walked out of the room. For the next week, that sobbing haunted me. It sounded like her heart was being ripped out, piece by piece. Sometimes, when I was alone on shift, I'd jump at every creak, wondering if I really had seen something unnatural. But time passed, and the memory began to fade. Until another night, around 1 a.m., when the phone shrieked again. "Front desk, good evening, how can I help you?" The man on the other end was snapping. "Is there construction going on? There's a banging in the next room so loud I can't hear myself think." He was in room 301. The only room next to it was 302. I promised to handle it. Nighttime in a hotel is a theater of the absurd. Drunken guests singing in the shower, people smashing plates at 3 a.m. One lady once demanded we turn off the AC in the next room because it was whispering her name. So, a banging sound didn't immediately shock me. I checked the log. A woman in her 40s was in 302. Business trip. I remembered her. Sharp suit, tired eyes. She'd requested a quiet room. I went up to the third floor. For a split second, I thought I saw a flash of white at the end of the hall, but I shook it off. The Do Not Disturb sign was hanging on 302. I didn't have a choice. I had to knock. No answer. I knocked louder. Still nothing. I was about to use my master key when the door creaked open. The woman was there, bleary-eyed, in a robe and a sleep mask pushed up on her forehead. She looked confused. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but there's a banging coming from your room. The neighbors are complaining. Is everything okay?" She frowned, rubbing her eyes. "Banging? I was sound asleep. I have a huge meeting tomorrow." She sounded genuinely annoyed. "I apologize, but I have to check. The guest next door is very insistent." She hesitated, then stepped aside. "Fine, and look for yourself," she muttered, crossing her arms. I flipped the light. The bed was rumpled, the curtains drawn tight. I walked toward the bathroom, which shared a wall with 301. I turned the handle, pushed the door open, and stopped dead. My blood turned to ice. On the white wall, right next to the mirror, was a massive red smear. Thick, uneven, with tiny droplets sprayed across the tile like stars in a nightmare. It was blood. No doubt about it. It looked like someone had slammed their head against the wall with incredible force. Or worse, as if a gunshot had sent a spray of gore across the room. Behind me, I heard a choked gasp. The woman had followed me in. She gripped the door frame, her eyes wide, her lips trembling. "What happened here?" I managed to choke out, trying to keep my voice steady. "Do you know anything about this?" I, she stammered, shaking her head. The terror in her eyes was real. You can't fake that. "Did you hear anything?" I asked. No, I sleep with earplugs. My God." "It's a miracle I heard you," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I just got up for a glass of water. Oh God." "Someone was in my room." She started to gasp, clawing at her throat. I was on the edge myself. I wanted to bolt for the exit, call 911 and scream, but I couldn't. A porter doesn't panic. A porter solves problems. "Come with me," I said, gently taking her arm. "I'm moving you to another suite. Pack your things. We'll handle everything." While she packed, my mind was racing. Someone had broken in and smashed something against the wall? Or some fit of rage? It made no sense. There were no signs of a struggle, no broken glass, not even a single stray hair on the floor. Just that blood. The guest was already muttering about the police. Her voice was trembling, and I knew if she talked, the hotel's reputation would go down the drain. And my job with it. I promised her we'd get to the bottom of it. I forced myself to breathe, took her bags, and led her to a vacant room on the second floor. I apologized profusely, promising her the entire stay would be on the house, just to smooth things over. She nodded, still pale, but the wild look in her eyes had faded. She seemed settled, at least for now. I waited until dawn and called Marcus. He picked up immediately, sounding groggy but alert. I told him everything. Marcus went silent for a long time, then let out a heavy sigh. "Don't touch anything until I get there," he snapped. "Don't tell a soul. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He arrived in less than an hour. I was waiting in the lobby, nervously fiddling with a button on my shirt. "Marcus, we have to call the cops. You need to see this. It's insane. We need to check the tapes." "We're not calling anyone." He cut me off. His voice was hollow. "What do you mean?" I almost shouted, but Marcus dragged me toward the service exit away from prying eyes. He pulled out a pack of Luckies, lit one with shaking hands, and exhaled a cloud of smoke into the morning mist. He wouldn't look me in the eye. "Look, Sam, what I'm about to tell you. It's hard to believe. I didn't believe it myself, but I don't see any other explanation," he began, dropping his voice. "When I took this job, the owners told me this house had a dark history. Why do you think it sat abandoned for half a century? Back in the 1800s, a wealthy sugar baron lived here. He had a wife, young, beautiful. The man was pathologically jealous. It started with shouting matches. Then he began locking her in the house. She was a prisoner here, slowly losing her mind. She'd wander the halls, weeping, hurting herself, slamming her head against the walls because he wouldn't let her out. It got to the point where one day, she completely snapped. She put on her wedding dress and her veil, went up to that mezzanine bedroom, stepped onto the balcony, and jumped. The fall was 3 stories. She might have survived it, but her veil got caught in the iron railing. She ended up, she hanged herself on her own wedding veil. A shiver ran down my spine. The image of the woman in the window flashed before my eyes. I swallowed hard. "Marcus, are you trying to scare me or what?" "The owners showed me the old newspaper clippings, Sam. People walking down the street saw her dangling there. Ever since then, locals have been terrified to even walk past the gates. The owners bought it for a song because of the curse, thinking time would wash the stories away. They made me swear I'd keep it quiet. Bad for business, obviously." "So you think it's her?" I whispered. "I'm a skeptic, Sam. Always have been. No, that stain on the wall, the crying in empty rooms, it's all fitting into a puzzle I don't want to solve." "Marcus, this is too much," I said. "We should call the authorities." "Absolutely not. We have a major inspection in a week. Everything has to be perfect or I lose this place, and you lose your shot at a life." "Just 1 week, Sam. Give me 1 week to get through the inspection, and then I'll find your replacement. I'll settle things with the guest in 302. She's a pro. She'll take the compensation and keep her mouth shut. Just keep your head down, please." He clapped me on the shoulder and went inside. I stayed out there. The image of the woman in the white veil burned into my mind. The next few shifts were a nightmare. Every creak of the floorboards, every draft of wind made my heart hammer. I was constantly looking over my shoulder, waiting for her to drift out of the shadows. Then came the night. Around 3 a.m., I heard footsteps on the stairs, light, almost weightless. Then a short, sharp gasp, followed by silence. I bolted from the desk. I headed for the stairs, heart in my throat. I reached the first landing, empty, but higher up on the 3rd floor, I heard them again. Fast, scurrying footsteps. I sprinted up, adrenaline surging. I rounded the corner toward room 310. The footsteps stopped right there. Without thinking, I grabbed the handle and threw the door open. I gasped. Standing in the middle of the room was a large, bald man. Completely naked, he stared at me, bug-eyed. I stared back. He was a high-profile guest from Chicago, a corporate big shot who usually walked around in three-piece suits like he owned the city. Now he was dripping wet from the shower, looking like I'd just burst in with an axe. "Listen here, you smartass. What do you think you're doing?" he roared. I turned bright red. I'm sorry. Room inspection. Alarm went off. Everything okay?" I stammered, backing away. He growled something, clearly not buying it. I practically ran back downstairs, my face burning with shame. I felt like a total idiot. I sat at the desk, trying to laugh it off, but then I remembered. The footsteps were real. I heard them, and the gasp. It wasn't a man's voice. I went out the service door to smoke, trying to clear my head. I looked up at the facade of the hotel. The mezzanine window was open. A white curtain was billowing out into the night, glowing under the pale moonlight. My heart stopped. The attic was locked. Marcus had the only key. Who opened the window? I ran back inside, flying up the stairs. When I reached the top landing, I couldn't breathe. The heavy padlock was gone. The door was wide open, a black maw leading into the dark. I clicked on my phone's flashlight. The beam cut through the gloom, hitting dust motes and cobwebs that hung like tattered lace. The floorboards groaned under my weight. In the center stood a four-poster bed, the sheets yellowed like old parchment. In the corner, a cracked mirror shimmered. Is someone there?" I called out. A soft sob came from the window. I swung the light. There, silhouetted against the moon, was the figure. Thin, in a long white dress, almost translucent. Her eyes, filled with infinite pain, looked right through me. She reached out her hands. I recoiled, the cold seeping into my marrow. "Please, go away," I whimpered. She stepped closer. A floorboard snapped, and my leg crashed through the rotted wood. I was stuck. Panic took over. I tried to scream, but she was there instantly. Her hand, ice cold and damp, clapped over my mouth. She gently but firmly turned my head toward the cracked mirror. In the glass, I didn't see us. I saw memories. I saw a massive man in 19th century clothes, his face twisted in a demonic rage. He was gripping a woman in a deep burgundy dress by the shoulders. "You're mine, only mine. Do you hear me?" he bellowed. He slammed her head against the wall. I heard the thud. I saw her body go limp. But he didn't stop. He hit her again and again. A crimson stain bloomed on the wallpaper. The scene shifted. I saw her wandering the house, weeping, pressing her face against the glass of the windows while the world outside ignored her. Then I saw her hiding in this very room. She was wearing the white dress now. She crawled under the bed, trying to hold her breath, but the door splintered open. His footsteps were like hammers. He dragged her out like a rag doll. His hands closed around her throat. I saw her eyes bulge, her fingers clawing at his wrists until the life flickered out. The man panicked. He grabbed a white wedding veil from the wardrobe. With trembling hands, he tied it around her neck, dragged her to the balcony, and threw her over. I heard the fabric tear, then catch. The body swayed in the moonlight. It was him. He murdered her was my last thought before the darkness swallowed me. I woke up in the hospital. Marcus told me the maids found me unconscious in the attic. I told him everything, the man in the frock coat, the blood, the veil. Marcus just looked at the floor. "Sam, there's nothing we can do. If you tell people this, they'll put you in a psych ward. Just let it go." I was discharged a few days later. I moved back to my cramped apartment, far away from the Maison Rouge. Marcus kept his word. He found a replacement. I never went back. But months have passed, and not a night goes by that the lady in white doesn't visit my dreams. She stands in the corner of my room, the veil draped over her shoulders like a shroud. Her tear-filled eyes never leave mine. I wake up in a cold sweat, listening to the muffled sounds of the city, and I realize, I can't set her free. And I'm terrified that she won't leave until she finally pulls me back into the shadows with her. If you like the story, please support the channel with a like and a subscription. See you soon.